Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting for Monday, February 12th. We welcome all those that are in attendance here today, those that are watching at home or watching on the net as well. Just a few highlights about our meeting this evening. We will have several items. We will meet as a beer board this evening and adjourn as a Board of Mayor and Aldermen at the conclusion of our meeting to take up the reevaluation of a suspended beer license. Also during the meeting this evening, we'll recognize our Germantown Police Department for reaccreditation. We will have our legislative agenda come forward. We'll also look at an ordinance on rezoning of property as well. This evening, our invocation will be led by Reynold Douglas. This evening, our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Vice Mayor Marianne Gibson. Prior to the invocation, we will recognize a moment of silence for our dear friend, Sherry Harris Clark. Many of you know that are gathered here today, and those that are at home, we lost a true friend and a great employee, our neighborhood coordinator, and so we will honor her this evening with a moment of silence. Mr. Douglas, if you could come forward. Let's stand for a moment of silence, please. Thank you.
Please bow in a word of prayer. Gracious and eternal God, our Father, again, we thank you for this day and how you have kept us in it. Lord, we come to you this evening with heavy hearts, remembering a loved one in this workforce, in this work family that we've lost. We know that you are a company keeper. We know that you're able to heal. We ask that you would heal us as a workforce and a work family, and more importantly, the family of our lost friend. We ask that you would be with our families, our work families that are going through life-changing experience, those that we know about and those that we do not know about. We know that you're able, and we trust that you will. We ask, Lord, that you would be a part of this meeting this evening. We ask that you would make the discussions, decisions, and everything about this meeting profitable for this organization and this community. In your name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Brings us to item number 4 on the agenda this evening, setting the agenda. The board meets in executive session at 5:30 prior to this meeting to go over the agenda in detail. At that point, the board requested that item 9D from the consent agenda be pulled for a full presentation. That item will be now heard as item 10A on the regular agenda. 10B will be the 2018 legislative agenda. Also during executive session, the board was in agreement to move item 11, Wolf River Boulevard, Germantown Road Intersection Improvements Project, Personal Services Agreement Supplement number 3, from the regular item to the consent agenda. That will replace item D, so that will now be D on the consent agenda. Are there any other adjustments or modifications to set the agenda this evening? Is there a motion to set the agenda as modified in executive session?
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Barzizza?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
The agenda has been set for this evening. Brings us to item number 5, approval of the minutes from January 22nd in executive session. There's an opportunity to review the minutes. There were no adjustments at that time. Are there any now? Is there a motion to approve the January 22nd minutes as presented to the public?
Move to approve.
It's a motion.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Barzizza?
Yes.
Minutes have been approved. It brings us to item 6 on the agenda, special recognition, Germantown Police Department, reaccreditation. Chief Hall.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. I'm very proud to bring to your attention the reaccreditation of your police department as recently as February 1st. It has been reaccredited by the Tennessee Law Enforcement Accreditation Program, which is under the direction and authority of the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police. I would at this time like to ask Deputy Chief Rodney Bright to step forward. He'll give you some background. I'm recovering from a cold, if you couldn't tell. And also, I want to acknowledge that Rodney has led our team and worked very hard to achieve this award.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor and Board, it's my honor to read a little bit of background about the accreditation process, about the police department. The police department originally achieved accreditation under the Tennessee Law Enforcement Accreditation Program in May of 2014. The Tennessee Law Enforcement Accreditation Program was created under the direction and authority of the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police, which supports and endorses continued improvement of law enforcement and emergency communications services by establishing standards of accountability, management, and operations. Once achieved, the accreditation certification requires reassessment after 3 years. During the summer of 2017, the department began its preparation for reassessment. This process included a comprehensive review of all policies, procedures, and practices. Although a reassessment is required every 3 years, the maintenance of policies and procedures is an ongoing process to ensure that the department is achieving its mission consistent with up-to-date constitutional methods and the application of best practice approaches in all areas of service. In January of 2018, the Tennessee Law Enforcement Accreditation assessors from outside law enforcement agencies conducted an on-site visit and assessment of department records. The assessors prepared a comprehensive report of their findings, which were submitted to the Tennessee Law Enforcement Accreditation Panel for review. During the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police meeting held on February 1st, 2018, the department was presented with its reaccreditation award. And just a little bit of further background, it certainly takes a team effort to go through this process, and I would be remiss without recognizing our staff members that have been involved early on and recently. So I would call up Captain Mike Fisher is our current accreditation manager, Inspector Alan Keller, who served in that role as well, and Captain Jody Whitfield, who also served as our original accreditation and manager. And we look at accreditation as not necessarily an award we achieve, but just kind of who we are and how we do business and how we look to deliver best practice and premier law enforcement services to the people that we serve. So we take a great pride in that, and we take great pride in this accomplishment, and we appreciate the board and the mayor's support in all things that we do in public safety.
Chief and Chief, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions or accolades from the board would like to heap on these gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen from the police department? Thank you, Police Department. You know, public safety has been a priority of this city for decades. It won't change anytime soon. We appreciate your service and you're protecting our safety in the community, so thank you very, very much. That brings us to item 7 on the agenda, Alderman Liaison Reports. We move from position 1 to position 5. Alderman Barzizza.
Thank you. The Historic Commission met on January 23rd and discussed the refurbishing of the old historical markers in the city, lighting the depot exterior, and continuing the study of the McVeigh Road Cemetery to try to identify some of those who are buried. And lastly, they discussed plans for a World War I remembrance to be observed on what used to be known as Armistice Day, or now Veterans Day. The 100th year anniversary of the armistice was signed between the Allies and the Central Powers at 11/11 at 11 a.m. Economic Development Commission met on February the 1st. Cameron Ross gave a report on each of the districts. Of note is the West Poplar District. MAA is preparing to move in here fairly soon, in the next several weeks, in the Trevere project. There was also reports on the Camel's Clinic project, in which Camel's Clinic is investing $47.3 million in the Wolf River District. A retention pilot was approved by the IDB. Shelby County approved a pilot as well. Also was discussed was an EDC feedback form in which the commission was asked to answer various questions regarding the EDC's mission. What value does the commission serve? Could the EDC leverage or influence any better way among the questions that chamber that might be available, questions they might have? The chamber report, though Janie wasn't there, was written for us, and topics discussed were the celebration of excellence, at which time they honored the nonprofit of the year serves. The small business of the year was Marco's Pizza. The large business of the year was One and Only Barbecue. And the chamber ambassador of the year was Charlie Speed of the Germantown Lumber Company. The Chamber's Health and Wellness Expo will be held on April 26, so please mark your calendar. Methodist Hospital is a presenting sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you for that detailed report. Vice Mayor Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. The Beautification and Tree Board would like to remind you to save the date for Arbor Day here in Tree City, Germantown. Friday, March 2nd, the annual Arbor Day and tree giveaway, plus the fruit tree sale, will happen between 9 and 11 in front of Huey's at the Germantown Crossing Center. This year, we'll be expanding our tree choices to Coosa dogwood, red twig dogwood, pink dogwood, and silky dogwood, as well as redbud trees. Just another reminder that we will be giving those trees away first come, first serve, and we will give them out till there are no more. So you will need to try to get there as early as you can. The Education Commission wrapped up its 7th annual Battle of the Brains competition over the weekend at Houston High School. The goal of the competition is to energize students' interest in math and science, encouraging students to pursue careers in these exciting fields. The Einstein Trophy was presented to Houston High students Madeline Aronson, Alana Kulyeva, and Zachary Huntsman for their project Med-Free Focus. Their project was created in order to help those struggling to focus, even with medication. The competition was generously sponsored by Iberia Bank. We had judges that came from University of Tennessee Health Science Center as well as Arkansas State University. We congratulate all of the winning teams and thank each of the students who participated, and I personally would like to thank the entire Education Commission who worked for months to host this day of academic excellence. Special thanks to staff liaison Stacy Ewell for going above and beyond to ensure the day was successful, and to the event founders, Dr. Dino Palazzolo and Dr. Stephanie Van Arsdale, for again their efforts to promote academic excellence here in Germantown. Our library board continues the work, ongoing programs which include activities centered around the Big Read. The book this year is True Grit, so there's lots of cowboys and special events around that. Every book counts. That initiative is going on, which would include library card. Make sure that you get your library card if you don't already have one. We would be supporting the Books from Birth initiative, which means that if you know a child 0 to 5 years old, please sign them up for the Books from Birth program, as well as the logging in your pages read for the month. I would like, and I know in consent we talked about the donation for the $2,000 donation for the Friends of the Library, $1,000 from them, as well as the Heritage Women's Club. That's my report for those. The Board of Zoning Appeals, there were no applications to be heard this month. However, the board will meet tomorrow for a work session. And that leaves us with neighborhood preservation. It is with a heavy heart that we prepare for the Neighborhood Preservation Commission meeting this Thursday without our neighborhood service coordinator. Our dear friend, Sherry Harris Clark, passed away last week, and while so many are still reeling from that crushing loss, we will press on in a way that honors the woman who lived the principles of excellence every day in her work and in the city she loved. Sherry's children reminded us that as they celebrated their mom's life, that the Neighborhood Preservation Commission's purpose is to promote a sense of community within our neighborhoods. And Sherry fulfilled that mission beautifully. As a citizen and as an exemplary and valued member of this staff, she was loving and kind, and we gratefully accept our Sherry's challenge to be good neighbors in the truest sense of the word.
Very well put, Vice Mayor. Thank you. Alderman Massey?
So I want to let everyone know I'm struggling with flu-like symptoms tonight and have a sore throat. So if I struggle to talk, please bear with me. The Environmental Commission met on February 1st. We continued our introductions, discussed relevant environmental issues, including a plan to increase education about recycling among our GMSD students. The police report from the Public Safety Education Commission, they asked me to ask the public to please volunteer for our Safety City, which is an event that we hold each year where we teach children in our community about safety, everything from bicycling to fishing. It's a number of different ideas that are incorporated, but we do need volunteers. If you have teenagers, we could use them, so please help us out with that. The other thing is we've had a number of burglaries over the past few weeks, a couple of robberies. The police, with regard to the burglaries, are asking us to remind residents to not leave your valuables in the open in your cars and to lock your car doors. So please do that. Help deter those folks from looking for items in Germantown. The fire report, Watermark Apartments are moving forward. The fire marshal's meeting with subcontractors. The new Germantown Elementary School at Forest Hill Irene and Poplar Pike continues, and the renovations to the retail space at 2130 Exeter are moving forward. The Trevere office building is moving toward completion. Above ceiling inspections have been completed on the 3rd and 4th floors, and there are no new developments under construction. We did have a fire at the El Porton restaurant. It was determined that it was the result of the fan motor. So with the Great Hall Commission, we'll meet tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Alderman Owens?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the Parks and Recreation Commission met on January 25th to review upcoming budget year items. The Planning Commission met on February the 6th for the election of officers. There were no additional agenda items. And the February DRC, or Design Review Commission, is going to meet the end of this month with multiple projects, including a grocery store signage. I'm trying to remember the name. Trader Joe's.
T, doesn't it?
That's all, Mayor.
Thank you. Alderman Yonda.
Thank you, Mayor. We had the Financial Advisory Commission meeting. I guess it was the day after January 23rd. Basically, we're going to be we approved the budget calendar, and that's what we'll be taking up in consent once we vote on that. Other than that, it was introductions of the new people and all the old people. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And quickly from the Mayor's office, the Memphis Area Association of Realtors put out their January numbers to begin the year, and the city's off to a very good start. We are units sold January over January of last year, up 28%. Median house sales price up 26.1%. Average sales price up 12.1%. Off to a great start. Also, in January, the city's sales tax collections were 13% over budget, over $104,000 more than anticipated, and year-to-date, up 10%. So keep shopping local, shop Germantown. That brings us to item 8 on the agenda, citizens to be heard. We have 4 citizens who would like to come forward. Each citizen filled out a sheet and signed an agreement to adhere to the principles and guidelines of citizens to be heard. I'll read those to you quickly. Citizens to be heard is designed to gain input from the public and not for immediate responses by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. The intent of the agenda item is to provide the public a platform to be thoughtfully heard and not a forum for dialogue, discussion, or verbal exchange with the board. While the board cannot assure each speaker of a specific or individualized future response, the board will consider the public comments and any supporting materials provided by the speaker. Speakers are asked to refrain from using names of personnel or names of the persons connected with the city, particularly when lodging a complaint. Speakers will not be permitted to engage in gossip, hearsay, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. As you come forth to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes to speak to the board. Our first participant is Kevin Speed. Mr. Speed, if you could come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Is your red button on, Mr. Speed? Just make sure. Yes.
No, it wasn't.
Okay, go ahead. Continue.
So start my 3 minutes over.
You're fine. I have a feeling
You got my address?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay. I'm representing the people of Forest Hill Heights. As you know, I've probably said this before, you know, we were, the Forest Hill Heights area quite a few years ago, we weren't in the city. We were Shelby County. And Germantown courted us to be annexed. And, you know, it sounded like a good idea. I've called Germantown home my whole life. We moved in Forest Hill Irene Road when I was in 1963, and I started Germantown Elementary in 64 and graduated in 75, 1 year behind my good friend Sherry Clark. And I love that girl. She was wonderful. And I'm going to miss her. And I'm sorry I missed her funeral. I was out of town. But back to the business at hand is about the zoning. You know, we have been here before. We were told from the front end there would be no zoning changes. That was a stipulation for us to be annexed. That we were promised over and over there would be no zoning changes. We were rural. We wanted to stay rural, but it was nice to be part of Germantown, I guess, officially, because we could have been Collierville, maybe could have been Memphis, but Germantown was what we chose, and we agreed to go. Soon after, the zoning changes start coming down the road, and you know, we question that, and you get well, things have changed, and so we went down to 1 acre. But that's never going to change. We promise you that's never going to change. We're going to keep it at 1 acre. The little time goes by, and then here comes the R zoning. And then you overlay smart growth, and then it's T4, and then there's apartments, and then there's, we were told there would be no apartments. There will be no apartments, you know, condominiums and townhomes for sale. Then the apartments show up, and there's 2 on the table. I'm sure there are more in the works. They don't fit in where we are. This zoning particular today, I guess, the state of the topic is of the Schaefer property north of the school that John Duke has proposed a subdivision in there. We even agreed to the zoning of R as long as it was kept to 15,000 square foot minimum, like the majority of Germantown. He wants to build a enclave type subdivision, and that does not fit in our area. But once again, we've been told things have changed. You know, if you look out there right now, nothing has changed except for the driveway to the new school started today and took out one of the biggest trees and started that. There's no Watermark Apartments, there's no Viridian, there's no widening of the road, there's no school, nothing has changed. I mean, so that every time we're told something changed, well, something has changed. You know, I sort of wonder where our hands are sort of like out like this going, what's happening? I mean, that just keeps coming, it just keeps coming. You know, I almost say if you had a beautiful young girlfriend and I told you I really liked her, but I promise you I'm never going to go out with her.
15 seconds.
And you saw me out with her one night having dinner, what would you say to me? Could I tell you things had changed? Would you accept that, you know? We see this R zoning is going to become a PUD, and they're going to take that even further down. 100% of the people in the Forest Hill Heights area are opposed.
Please conclude your comments, please.
I'll conclude with the fact that 100% of the people are opposed to it, and we've been here time and time again. We'd like you to adhere to it. Just adhere to it.
Thank you, sir.
Very much.
Ken Hoover, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Ken Hoover at 3040 Sandy Creek Drive. Guess I know where I live. Mr. Mayor, Alderman, I'm here tonight to try and help. I appear before you to offer a suggestion or at least an observation, and here's what I see. Viridian is the problem. A lot of the pushback that we see in the community relative to apartment development comes from that preliminary approval late last year for the Viridian units. The Forest Hill Heights plan, we're told we're following a plan. We're following a plan. Well, for Watermark, that's true. Watermark fits exactly in the Forest Hill Heights plan as drawn. It's not true for Viridian. The plan included 10 goals and 28 guiding principles that's supposed to lead us to this vision that's so compelling. A village green, retail, restaurants, condos, apartments nearby. It's a really great vision. But to achieve that vision, we have to follow those guiding principles, and Viridian doesn't do that. And I'm not going to take you through all 28 points, but just a few. The apartments should be well connected to the village core. Viridian's not. The apartments should be adjacent to retail. Viridian is not. Development should start at the village core and radiate outward. Viridian does not. All development should enhance neighboring values. Viridian does not. Development should be built against a realistic market forecast. Viridian ignores the market forecast. And then finally, one of the guiding principles that appears multiple times in the plan, single-family residential houses should be in the area north of Winchester. Well, now that's changed. And we haven't heard anything about why it changed except that's not what Boyle wants to build there. So my message is this: citizens are not angry because we're following a plan. Citizens are angry because we took the plan that they helped write and threw it out the window. Now, most citizens can't go through point by point like I just did, but they instinctively know this is not what we signed up for. So here we are. Viridian has preliminary approval. What do we do? Well, I have two suggestions. One, let's insist that the Planning Commission be uncompromising with Viridian and the guiding principles that are in the plan. Viridian's in the wrong place at the wrong time. But if we faithfully follow the plan, when they come back for final review, we'll get the right decision. But secondly, and maybe more importantly, we need to beef up our processes. Every proposal should be measured against the goals and principles that are in the plan. And that review should be shared with the Planning Commission, with
15
the DMA.
seconds.
The plan itself tells us that if we don't have robust planning processes, we'll wind up with random development. And that's what Viridian is. It's a random development. So I share this with you tonight in hopes of helping. I hope that is helpful. And finally, thank you, each and every one of you, for your service to our great city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoover. Brian Barbato, if you could come forward and state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes once you come forward.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Brian Barbato. I live at 9316 Garner Woods Cove. It's a pleasure to be here today. I am currently the Chief Executive Officer of Mid-South Imaging and Therapeutics. Approximately 3 years ago, I moved my corporate headquarters to Germantown as well as an imaging center. We are proud corporate citizens and proud to be here in Germantown. More importantly, I'm here today speaking to you as a citizen, and I'm here in support of the retention pilot for Campbell Clinic. I am a patient of Campbell Clinic, but more importantly, my family are patients of Campbell Clinic. Campbell Clinic is a destination. That's not a building. It's a place to be treated. It's an institution. My mother was a patient of Campbell Clinic. She traveled 400 miles to come to this first-class institution for care. We are lucky to have that privilege. There are many facilities she could have gone to. She chose to come to this facility. I would encourage you all today to approve this pilot to retain one of our treasured institutions of this community, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have as to what a citizen, a patient, and a business leader may have regarding this program. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker on the agenda is Eric Mounts. Mr. Mounts, if you could come forward and state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Eric Mounts. My residence is 8898 Winding Way here in Germantown. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Board of Aldermen, Chief, Mr. City Attorney, City Administrator. It's my first time to speak in front of all of you. It's a pleasure to be here, not only as a city resident, but also as the Chief Executive Officer of the West Cancer Center. In 2015, we decided, after reviewing so many different options, to move to this great city. We've opened up a huge cancer center here in Germantown, and the myriad of decision points we went through in order to make our final decision to occupy where we are today was huge. And many of those points were dedicated around certain things that this city offered that other places didn't offer. Several of them you've talked about tonight already: an unbelievable police force, a commitment to EMS. Many of our first responders from the city come to our cancer center every day. But other things we needed to look for is collaboration with physicians, collaboration for patient referrals, collaboration for staff, and a proximity with physicians on a level really unheard of in many communities. When the prior speaker spoke to Campbell Clinic about being sort of a national known product, I do want to let you guys know that they wrote the book on orthopedics, okay? For us, it's imperative to be collaborative and on par with physicians of such caliber. As the West Cancer Center moves to an NCI designation, these are the partners we want. Finally, we have outgrown our building, and we are desperately searching for other ways to grow within the city. This building potentially gives us some options to maintain additional square footage in our campus area without having to look outside the city. I thank you for the opportunity, and I urge you to support the retention pilot program. And I urge you to maintain the status you can with your first responders and your police force, so companies like West, companies like Campbell Clinic, and the citizens of Germantown can feel safe and taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate the comments of all 4 people who spoke this evening. And that concludes Citizens to be Heard for this month's Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting. That takes us to the consent agenda, item 9 on the agenda this evening. I'll go through those items quickly. Item 9A, Contract Wireless Transmission Facility Agreement, SprintCom Incorporated. Item 9B, Donation Germantown Community Library. Item 9C, Fiscal Year 2019 Budget Calendar. Item 9D, which was actually pulled and will be presented to the traditional agenda, was replaced with item 11, that is Wolf River Boulevard, Germantown Road Intersection Improvements Project Professional Services Agreement Supplement Number 3. Item 9E, Ordinance 2017-7, amended rezoning Wolf River Center, correction to legal description. Item 9F, right-of-way acquisition, Tract 1, Germantown Road, Wolf River Boulevard Intersection Improvement Project. Item 9G, excuse me, right-of-way acquisition, Tract 15, Germantown Road, Wolf River Boulevard Intersection Improvement Project. Item 9H, water treatment SCADA system upgrade, software acquisition. Item 9I, wireless transmission facility modification, Verizon equipment upgrades, 7624 Poplar Pike. Item 9J, wireless transmission facility modification, Verizon equipment upgrade, Cameron Brown, 8594 Farmington Boulevard. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified?
Move to approve. Second.
It's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Barziza?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
The consent agenda is approved. That brings us to item number 10 on the agenda. Yes. Well, we took a vote. Thank you. Item 10A on the agenda. Again, that was formerly item 9D. So if you could make sure, board, you find that currently in your packet. And that item is Grant Germantown Education Foundation. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. The Board of Mayor and Aldermen is asked this evening to consider granting a grant to the Germantown Education Foundation in the amount of $100,000. For the past several years, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen has appropriated in each fiscal year's budget the amount of $100,000 to support the efforts of the Germantown Education Foundation. Established in 2006, the primary role of the Education Foundation is to provide funding directly to support, now at this point in time, the 5 schools located within the Germantown Municipal School District. They do this in a number of ways. In addition to the grant that's provided by the board, included in this year's budget as well and approved by this body, but they do it in a number of ways. Formerly known as Fill the Fountain, there is the Friends of the Foundation that provides funding to support the efforts of the Education Foundation. There's the Race for Education, I believe in its 2nd or 3rd year, which is wildly successful in terms of raising again, funds to help support and supplant the dollars that this body provides for the foundation. And now more recently, the Oktoberfest, which we hope to be a continuing and ongoing operation, will provide funding as well to support the efforts of the Education Foundation. I would close my comments, Mayor, by saying that we have a number of members from the Education Foundation Board with us this evening, and like any great 501c3, which this body is, it depends upon the volunteer efforts and spirit of the men and women who are involved in the foundation. They've been there for a number of years, and they do a terrific job in supporting the work of this foundation and making those dollars available to the 5 schools within the city of Germantown. So the direct request before the Board of Mayor and Aldermen this evening is to consider funding that's already been identified in the FY18 budget and make that appropriation to the foundation so they can continue their work. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
I may
Lawton.
also add that Stephanie Brockway, the Executive Director of the foundation, is here as well as our members of the foundation itself.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Is there a motion to approve payment of a grant to the Germantown Education Foundation in the amount of $100,000?
Move to approve.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion, and let me just make sure that the record states that I am a board member of the Germantown Education Foundation as well. Questions or comments?
I do have some
Mr. Massey?
So, as an elected official, it's never a popular position to speak in opposition to something involving education. This has the name Education Foundation in its name, but the Germantown Education Foundation was actually formed before the city of Germantown formed its own municipal school district. It was a way to distribute funds to different causes within our schools. So today we have our own school system, and I personally think that we should be allocating this $100,000 directly to our schools, and that's what I would like to ask the board to do. I'm going to briefly read some comments, and we can move from there. The Germantown Education Foundation has made a very positive contribution to our community, but it is an independent organization with their own employees and expenses, and the city has no control or oversight over how the organization manages money. The administration is asking the board to grant $100,000 to an independent organization without providing us with any information on the foundation's financials or how the money will be spent, or if the foundation actually needs a $100,000 grant. This money is not the board's money to freely spend. This is the taxpayers' money, and after the majority voted to increase property taxes, I think we owe it to the taxpayers to make sure the money is being managed in their best interest. We need to consider whether it is prudent to give $100,000 to an independent organization with no city oversight rather than giving the money directly to our schools. With that said, I would like to make a motion to have a commitment from the board to allocate this $100,000 directly to GMSD and postpone the decision on whether or not the Germantown Education Foundation should get the $100,000 grant tonight. I think we need to do some more research into the financials and exactly how the Germantown Education Foundation is spending this money. That's it.
Would you like to rephrase your, you made a motion. Could you put that into a form that's a little bit more succinct? Do you have anything prepared?
Well, my comments were prepared. Sure, I could.
It's helpful for the clerk and the people and for the record if a motion is made that is encapsulated in maybe a short sentence.
Well, my first motion, we probably should do it in 2 motions then. So my first motion would be to increase the budget for the Germantown Municipal School District by $100,000. Now, it doesn't matter to me whether we take that motion first or we take the motion to postpone the grant to the Germantown Education Foundation first. So I'll leave that up to you, Mayor.
Well, no, it's your motion and your thought, and so if you're going to propose those 2 things, one of them, if you want to defer or postpone, that would probably be the motion that I would make if I were sitting in your chair, opposed to wanting to do something differently. But that's up to you.
Sure. Well, you know, the motion was really a combined motion stating that we would postpone the vote on the grant to the Germantown Education Foundation, and that we would commit to reallocating that money to the Germantown Municipal School District. That way the school isn't losing any money. We're actually giving it directly to the schools. And I think the motion speaks for itself and is fairly clear.
Well, if you postpone something and then actually come up with the plan, there's no need to do both things. Do you want to make a motion to allocate $100,000 directly to GMSD?
I think that would be, I think what we're asking for is a commitment from the board to do that. We don't have to actually allocate that money tonight, but I'm asking for the commitment from the board. It's no different than, say, a resolution to do something. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're voting to say that we're going to allocate this $100,000 directly to the school so that the school district does not lose this money.
I would look to our attorney, I mean, just in the form of a motion in that sense.
Alderman Massey, it's your motion to propose. Taking into account what you've said in the various pieces, perhaps your motion that you would like to make is to amend the motion that's before the board now, which is to grant the Germantown Education Foundation $100,000. Perhaps your motion is to amend it to grant the $100,000 to GMSD. Does that sound like what you're
I think that's what I'm
attempting
trying to accomplish, yes.
All right, well, if you want to, well, I think perhaps the process would be for Alderman Massey to state that motion, and we can determine if there's a second and then go from there.
Thank you. And then the city administrator would like to add some things. I have a feeling that you're going to talk about how budgets have to be amended and things of that nature. Go ahead. And
Well,
whether things are maintenance of effort as well. Go ahead.
That was my concern, Mayor. The allocated in this year's budget, I believe, is close to $2.5 million in direct support to the Germantown Municipal School District, let alone the $45 million that the city has provided for direct capital expenditures for the district. The $100,000, and I'm just pointing this out to the board, keep in mind the maintenance of effort. Our maintenance of effort is based upon what 15 cents on the tax rate will generate. This would add another $100,000 that's not part of that 15-cent tax rate. And these dollars absolutely would be considered operating dollars and not classified as capital, and therefore would raise our maintenance of effort.
Well, hold on. Alderman Massey has the floor. Do you have some thoughts about the motion again after the feedback?
No, I don't think that changes my position.
Okay. There is a motion to amend the motion that was brought forth and put on the table to appropriate $100,000 to GMSD. Is there a second? The motion fails without a second. We continue with debate and dialogue.
Comment.
Yes, Alderman Barzizza.
Would it not be prudent to have the Education Foundation be supervised or have direct oversight with the Education Commission being the responsible party for that? Counselor?
Well, my understanding is that the Germantown Education Foundation is a separate 501c organization. Contributions to it are tax deductible. It has its own board. It receives, I suppose, this income as well as others. Mr. Lawton could speak to that. And it then makes the decisions on how to disperse those funds. It is following the structure that was created when it was formed.
So wouldn't the Education Foundation, as formed as a 501c3, be under the scrutiny of the public at any given time?
Well, like any not-for-profit organization, yes. I mean, and to the extent it files 990s, I don't know, do you know its total income? I don't.
So my comment is.
How much? What? It files 990s, okay.
So my comment is,
I don't know the details.
then the public has direct scrutiny over what the Education Foundation does with their funds.
Yes, the public has the same rights as to it as it would with any other 501c3
As a
organization,
501c3, yeah.
Established by under the not-for-profit corporation statutes in Tennessee. Yes.
So back to my original comment, could we not have the Education Commission act as a vehicle to oversee the Education Foundation?
I don't think that's.
I think the concern about that, Alderman Barzizza, is the way the Education Commission ordinance is written. That's not in their purview and not in their stated purpose.
But could we not put it in their stated purpose at a later date, if nothing?
It would be up to this body to make a ordinance change to the roles and responsibility of the Education Commission.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
If I could ask Ms. Brockway or Mr. Betos to come forward, I have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you for your service. Both of y'all, feel free to come on up. My question would be, what is the dollar amount as far as grants awarded from the foundation? I know that you've been in existence for quite some time, since Germantown Municipal Schools have been in existence for the last 4 years. Can you speak to dollar figure?
Well, let me give you, can I go back and give a little history?
I'd love that, thank you.
And then let Stephanie give, since she's been the executive director for a little over 2 years. We were originally founded in 2006 upon request of the city, and the city does have oversight. They approve any board member on the Germantown Education Foundation. So you do have oversight. In the first 5 years, we were really set up to grant the $100,000 that was put into our trust each year to our schools. And through that, and it was strictly a voluntary board, through matching grants and hard work, we were able to raise an additional $500,000. So the city over 5 years gave us $500,000. We raised an additional $500,000. So $1 million went into our schools, into our classrooms, into our students, into our teachers. Then we kind of had a lull as, and then about 2.5 years ago, we were approached as far as, it was always a goal. I was one of the founding board members. It was always our goal eventually is to really do a campaign and raise about $3 million in our community that would all be able to provide grants and endowment that we can continue our work of improving education of our students. And I heard about the talk about the price values of homes, and that's one of the things that attracts people to our community is our education. So with that, about 2.5 years ago, as the cities formed their schools, they came back to us and said, really, we would like to go on a 4-year journey, grant $100,000 a year that would allow us to hire a full-time executive director initially and begin that fundraising and assessment of can the foundation in our Germantown community raise $3 million over a 3-year period? Is it feasible? And that's the study that we utilized some of the funds that were granted to us. So with that, they came back and said it is viable going forward. So we're looking at it was kind of a 4-year commitment. This will be the 3rd year, and we're on that journey so that by the end of another 2 years, we will be well upon our way of raising that $3 million, and by that, be self-sufficient and no longer need the support of the city. So with that, as far as the last 2 years, Stephanie?
And before, Ms. Brockway, before you go, Mr. Betos, y'all conduct annual audits?
Yes, we do.
501c?
Yes, we do. In fact, I signed the last 994 on Monday.
Thank you. Ms. Brockway.
Yes, I thank you. I spent the last 2.5 years really letting the community know who we were as a foundation because, as Mr. Betos said, that initially we just took that $100,000 and then we asked for those principals and those specific schools to match those grants. And so now we are a fundraising entity, so I spent the first 1.5 years really pounding the pavement and going out and letting the public know that this is what we want to do. This is our hearts in order to give back into our municipal schools and to help our teachers individually and our principals and to really impact every child. We do that through, several events. Our race, which is coming up April 29th, on average, we give over $25,000 back into the hands of school within 2 weeks of that race. 2 weeks. That's an automatic thing. And then this spring, we're giving $60,000 in grants. 60. Last year, we gave 50, and the year before, we gave 40. So all in all, we're constantly, every penny that we're getting, we are turning around and giving it back to the schools. And if you go to our website, it's very clearly laid out so that every person in the city can see where all of our money goes, because we're proud to be able to give back to our teachers and to help our students and to ultimately raise those property values and keep everybody coming here for our schools.
Thank you very much. And I see former city attorney Debbie Wiles has joined us. She's also a member of the Germantown Education Foundation, and I wanted to thank you each for your service, because I know what it takes. The events that you put on in our city are not show up for a couple of hours. They take months of preparation, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
The other comment that I had, y'all can go ahead and be seated. The other comment I had to speak to Alderman Barziza's comments about the Education Commission. The mission of the Education Foundation is actually different from the Education Commission. Education Foundation is solely focused on Germantown municipal schools, period. The Education Commission, their purpose is broader. They encompass every school within our confines. So, thank you.
Thank you. We're on round one. Alderman Owens or Alderman Yonda? Alderman Yonda.
I'm just for voting for this. It's excellent. They do an excellent job. They continue to do an excellent job, and the plan is working. And I'm just not sure what the problem is. You can take a look and see what their expenditures are, or you can even ask them for it. So let's move on it.
Alderman Owens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm I guess echo, I'm proud of the work that the Germantown Education Foundation has done, the fundraising they've accomplished. I believe it is a transparent board, and we're able to review those transactions when necessary, and so I support them, and I believe this is a good grant.
Alderman Barziza.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just bringing that up in regards to oversight, just to reassure Alderman Massey that as that foundation is 501c3, they're under public scrutiny. Having been involved in several different 501c3s, I already knew that. Thank you, Counselor, for the clarification. Helps us all out. But I was just trying to put your mind to rest. I'm a supporter of the Education Foundation. The first time I met Stephanie, I became very enamored with what she was doing, and the comment that I made to her that day is that I thought the foundation needed to act like a private school and have our 5 schools be treated almost as such, and fundraising, and that's exactly what you're doing, and I'm very proud of what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mayor, I think
Alderman Massey.
Perhaps I didn't convey my sentiments exactly like I meant to, because I haven't said that the Germantown Education Foundation isn't a worthy foundation. Clearly you are. I just think that you've outgrown your need for taxpayer subsidies. And my opinion is that we can give this money directly to the schools and remove the middleman. We're not taking money away from our schools. We're actually giving money directly to the schools and removing the middleman. So we're actually giving more money to the schools because you don't incur those overhead costs that might be incurred by using that $100,000 through the foundation. You guys have millionaires that sit on your board. We have taxpayers that just paid a tax increase, and we're giving you guys a $100,000 grant. What I'm saying is I just don't think that you need the taxpayer subsidy anymore. I want you to do well. I want you to continue your cause and grow and raise more money, but I just would like to see you do it without money that could go directly to our schools. That's it.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Owens.
Yeah, just one more comment, I guess, with regards to this, and you guys touched on it. It's the maintenance of effort. if we provide this money, what the Education Foundation, in my opinion, is attempting to do is to take this money and to grow that money and to grow this seed and to bring it back so we can multiply that money. The maintenance of effort, if we take this money and put it directly to the schools, then we are on the hook for that every year, whether it be a good year, whether it be a bad year. But whereas if we give this to the Germantown Education Foundation, they can grow it and we can see it come back in multitudes, or it can grow more so we can do better and support the schools in better ways.
Thank you. Or Vice Mayor Gibson?
Alderman Owens covered it. Thank you.
The motion has been made, it's been properly seconded. Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens,
Sorry, just to be clear, I don't want to touch you, get the flu. No, we're voting on Alderman Massey's.
The original motion, the Alderman Massey's amendment did not have a second, and so it is not moved
So the
forward.
original motion, I would vote yes.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes, absolutely.
Alderman Barzizza.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
No.
The motion carries. We appreciate the service of the Germantown Education Foundation. As I mentioned earlier, under full disclosure, I am a member, and in 2006, as an alderman, I helped create the foundation so that we could have the ability to not have partisan politics and other things to issue grants. And you guys, I think since '06, have actually produced somewhere closer to $2 million in total granting as it relates to the matches that you've received and the fundraising that you have made, or you have created, and then also the grants as well. So we applaud your efforts and look forward to some more work coming forward soon. Congratulations. That takes us to item 10B on the agenda, which is actually, the printed version was item 10, the 2018 legislative agenda. Mr. Lawton?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. The city of Germantown has long held the belief that if we're going to be effective as a local government, we have to remain vigilant and to remain advocates for our community. One of the ways we do that is to monitor legislation, not only at the federal level, but also, and more particularly at the state level. There's a saying we used to use in City Hall, and it goes something like this: oftentimes when the General Assembly is in session, that cities could possibly be at risk in terms of bad legislation that may come down the pike. So a number of years ago, we engaged the services of a lobbyist. Mr. John Ferris is with us this evening to help us monitor legislation that is coming out of Nashville. I've attached to your agenda sheet a number of bills. I believe there's 12 bills that we are tracking this legislative session to get a better understanding of the impact, the potential impact that they may have upon the city of Germantown. These bills range everything from small broadband cell towers that the city wants to really take a close look at. We have a ordinance, as a matter of fact, that is making its way through the Planning Commission to deal with this. AT&T, and I won't go in this level of detail on all the bills. AT&T has introduced a bill, and we want to make sure that there's not a preemptive move through this bill at the state level that might take away some of the local control or aesthetics in place. We certainly, in this particular bill, do not want to be in the way of enhancing new wireless technology for our residents, but on the other hand, we have to be concerned about what this impact might have on our community. Other bills we're studying and watching extremely closely. De-annexation has not gone away. We're not quite sure what shape or form it's going to take this year, and how it might impact the city of Memphis and surrounding areas within Shelby County. It could have an impact on Germantown. Short-term rentals and transient housing, for example. The board passed an ordinance in our residential zoning code dealing with that. There's legislation before the General Assembly now that could have a negative impact, again, a preemptive move to overstep local authority. So a number of the bills deal with issues along those lines to make sure that we are in control of what's happening to the best of our ability. And the way that we do that is by adopting this legislative agenda, working very closely with our lobbyists, working very closely with our state senators and representatives in Nashville, having our faces present, having our voices heard in terms of the legislation that might be proposed. This list, these 12 items, by no means is exhaustive. Because as Mr. Ferris could tell you, we have not seen all the bills that were filed. February 1st was the filing deadline for these bills, but I can assure you that we will pay attention not only to these and their impact upon our city, but also other bills that are now getting sponsorships and starting to get legs a little bit, if you will, in terms of the impact upon our city. So with that, Mayor, I'll be quiet. Mr. Ferris is here. If you have any questions of him about any of the bills we're tracking, and as I mentioned before, as new things come along, we will track those as well.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Is there a motion to approve the City of Germantown 2018 legislative agenda?
Move to approve.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion, please. Alderman Massey.
So I'm not sure if Attorney Ferris would like to answer this or if Mr. Lawton would, but there is a position that's been stated by the mayor's administration where he opposes House Bill 884. And I think most of the residents of Germantown are fairly conservative people. We favor gun rights. This bill does not favor gun rights. It's a limitation on gun rights, and I'd just like to know how the decision was made to support this in Nashville when it seems to be in opposition to what most of our residents would want.
Alderman Massey answered that question very succinctly and asked Chief Hall to weigh in on it. When we look at the legislation in totality that could impact the city, I reach out to my department heads who are plugged into their various state associations, and I look very strongly and heavily upon the recommendations that are coming out, whether it's the Public Works Association or the Fire Chiefs Association, and in this case, certainly the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police, who have taken a position in opposition to House Bill 884. And based upon that recommendation from the Chiefs Association and law enforcement and public safety, the city is adopting. My recommendation is to this body is that we adopt that same position.
So I'm going to read some comments that I have here. So the people that will benefit the most from this amendment are people who have already demonstrated that they are law-abiding citizens who met the state and federal requirements that allowed them to receive their handgun carry permits in the first place. I submit to you that we are all safer in these law-abiding citizens when these law-abiding citizens have fewer restrictions placed on their rights to carry their firearms. Broadly speaking, no offense, Chief, and I'm sorry you've been put in this into a situation where you're having to respond to a political issue. I don't like that. So broadly speaking, rank and file police in America support gun rights because officers on the street know a good guy with a gun might someday save their life too. Unfortunately, when self-serving politicians want to posture against citizen gun rights, they have police chiefs appear with them as props or spokesmen to support an anti-gun political agenda. The citizens of Germantown do not want their elected representatives furthering the cause of big city politicians who are dedicated to gun control. The majority of Germantown voters are conservative Republicans who generally support citizen gun rights, so the city should support House Bill 884. I would like to make a motion to amend the city's position to state that the Board of Aldermen supports the legislation.
Mayor, if I could comment, I think Alderman Massey, with all due respect, your comments to the chief were very disrespectful in terms of putting him in a political position or adopting a political stance. That is not the nature of the Tennessee Association of Chief of Police. These are professional chiefs from around the state who have formed this position. And Chief, with that, I would like you to comment upon the legislation.
Yes, sir. And I would like to open with this is a situation that, pulls at my heart. My dad, who's deceased, was a gunsmith and a very much a believer in the right to carry arms. I believe people have the right to protect themselves. I have served on the board of directors for the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police for 4 years in the past, and I'm currently active with that association, and they don't take any of these bills lightly. It looks like what they really are looking at is not, if you see how broad these bills are being written, it allows somebody to put a gun in the locker at our athletic center. It would, oh, can you hear me? Oh, I believe possibly, but judicial proceedings like courts are being upheld, but they really are making it so expansive that, when you bring in officer safety and an officer shows up on a scene and two individuals are pointing a gun at each other, the chiefs of police are very conservative on where you can take the gun into. Not that you can't have a gun to protect yourself as a castle law, your house, or your car, if that helps.
There's a motion for the legislative agenda to support House Bill 884. Is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails. We continue with debate. Mr. Massey, you still have the floor if you want it.
So, Chief, I appreciate and I respect your response, and I'll leave it at that. So, to the board, you know, as a general rule, police officers encourage an expanded right for citizens to carry their firearms. What they will tell you, particularly with chiefs, a lot of times what they will tell you, they tell you because the politicians are the ones that decide whether they stay on board or whether they get terminated. So they're put into a very tough position when they're asked to take political positions on these types of issues, because ultimately it's the politicians that can fire them. I just don't think that taking this position aligns us with the views of the majority of our citizens, and I just, again, state my opposition to the position that has been stated by the mayor's administration.
Floor is open. There's been a motion to adopt the legislative agenda as presented and published and properly seconded. Any more discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Alderman Barzizza.
Thank you. I look at the proposed legislation, and one thing that, having been to the Hill many, many times, there's actually not enough information presented here. I've requested during executive session that we get the sponsors of the bill, of each of the bills, and their full captions and all the information possible. And I know Attorney Ferris will keep us well informed as to the progress of each of these bills. Having said that, I'm going to abstain from the vote on this particular matter until that full information is provided to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
No.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
and Alderman Barzizza.
Abstained. Yeah.
The motion carries, and the legislative agenda has been set for 2018. Chief Hall, you have my full support. Just want you to know that on the record. Thank you, sir. Item number 11, I'm sorry, that was moved to consent agenda. Item 12 on the agenda, retention pilot, Campbell's Clinic. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to make initial comments regarding the pilot, go over some of the facts and the history that led up to this approval by the Industrial Development Board and now presentation to the board this evening. I'm then going to ask Andy Jones, who is with the law firm, and he's our tax attorney and also works very closely with the IDB on all matters IDB. And then, Mayor, we have representatives from Campbell's who will make a presentation this evening regarding their project as well, and the team from Campbell's is in the front row here. So if I will begin. In 2001, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen approved the bylaws and charter establishing the Industrial Development Board for the City of Germantown. There are 7 members of the Industrial Development Board, all elected by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. The charter of the IDB, as approved in 2001, allows the Industrial Development Board to engage in the issuance of a pilot payment programs on behalf of the city, primarily to encourage economic growth and development within our city. One thing to keep in mind when the IDB was initially formed, strictly initially for the purpose of grading pilots, it was developed as a way to encourage and to retain Class A offices and corporations and public corporations within our community. Unlike the bylaws that you would see for a number of other IDBs in this part of the state. In 2009, the charter of the Industrial Development Board was amended to allow for the issuance of tax increment financing bonds or other forms of obligations to support further economic development activities within our community. In front of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen this evening is a retention pilot application from Campbell Clinic, PC. The term pilot stands for the benefit of our audience, payment in lieu of tax. The city's Industrial Development Board, formed under state statute, is a nonprofit corporation. As such, pilots necessitate that the Industrial Development Board actually take ownership of the property during the term of the pilot program, thus making the property tax exempt. There are benefits to both parties in a pilot transaction. In the city of Germantown, the city is able to take advantage and attract major economic development drivers and large capital investments in our community. And professional corporations, such as Campbell Clinic, are able to utilize an economic development incentives to further grow their company and to further grow and support the local economy. There are currently 1 active pilot programs in our city, and that is MAA, that is currently coming out of the ground, and 1 retention pilot within the city of Germantown. Every pilot application that comes before city staff and the Industrial Development Board is considered on a case-by-case basis. Approval of a pilot by the IDB, retention pilot in this case by the IDB, is based upon a formal application submitted by the applicant, in this case Campbell's. All retention pilot applications must go through a very detailed review process based upon 3 primary considerations: job creation, wages paid based on Germantown's per capita income, and the total level of investment. Under this matrix, the application can receive a number of points that tie directly to the length and term of the retention pilot. A little bit of history, and I know I'm not going to steal any of your thunder, George, but Dr. Willis Campbell opened the first Campbell Clinic in 1909. Today, Campbell Clinic is recognized as the world leader in sports medicine, pediatric orthopedics, joint replacement, orthopedic oncology, and hip, knee, shoulder, and spine surgery. Campbell Clinic relocated to Germantown in 1992, and having been with the city for 30-plus years, I can recall with a great deal of pride the day Campbell made the decision to move into our community in 1992. And they have steadily, if you've noticed, grown their medical and corporate footprint along Germantown Road over the past 26 years. They are seeking a retention pilot to help facilitate their next planned expansion. Under guidelines adopted by the city's Industrial Development Board, a retention pilot is granted as an incentive for a company to remain in their current location. A little bit about the project itself, and I know they'll go into that as well, but the project itself consists of a new 120,000 square foot medical office and renovations to the existing orthopedic clinic, physical therapy building, and existing surgery center. Based on their application, and as I mentioned, when applied to the IDB matrix, the project before you, the retention pilot before the board this evening, as identified in your agenda material, will generate the following additional jobs. These are additional jobs in our community, 185 additional jobs. Average wage, $67,469, which is 125% of the per capita income in Germantown. The real property improvements, including building, land, site, and improvements, are valued at $38 million. The personal property is valued at $9,300,000 for a total capital investment of $47,300,000. On Monday, January 29, 2018, the Industrial Development Board met to consider this application, and after a complete and thorough review of the retention pilot, retention pilot and presentation by city staff and the applicant, the Industrial Development Board recommended and approved a motion that gave Campbell's Clinic and granted them a 8-year retention pilot with a 75% abatement of the city's annual real and personal property tax. Included in your agenda sheet is correspondence from Mayor Palazzolo to County Mayor Luttrell, also asking the county as well to grant a pilot under these terms for the county taxes associated with this project. The administration recommends approval of this retention pilot request. And Mayor, as I stated, at this time I'd like staff attorney, Andy Jones, who's with the law firm, who is also the advisor to the Industrial Development Board, to come forward and talk a little bit about the legal requirements and the thresholds that they've met, Andy, in coming forward.
As far as Mr. Lawton, you did steal some of my thunder. We went through each of the items as far as there was a meeting on January 29th, a quorum was held. The board examined the application. They found it met each of the policy requirements, and I'll go through each one of those in a second.
Mr. Jones, is your mic on?
I have no idea.
Look for the red button.
It's on. Is this better? I also have a little cold.
Okay, you may just be too tall for the...
Sorry. The board did vote on the motion. They approved a recommendation of 8 years to the BMA. As far as the specific requirements of the retention pilot, the first is that the business must have been in Germantown for at least 5 years. Campbell Clinic's been here since 1992. The second is the company must be financially sound. In your package is a letter from Paul Turner where he reviewed their finances and found them to be financially sound. The third is they must expand their operations and put the company in a better position for longevity. They are building a 4th building to increase, I believe, 3 additional operating rooms. That meets that definition. The company must demonstrate a long-term commitment to the city. They are building a $48 million building. The company must invest a minimum of $1 million in real and personal property. They're investing $47,300,000. The company must retain a minimum of 40 full-time jobs, and they are adding 185. The financial benefit within Shelby County must be a 2-to-1 ratio over the cost, and this one is 3.5 to 1.
Thank you.
Does that conclude your report? Thank you, Mr. Jones. Campbell, would you like to make a presentation this evening? If you could come forward, and we all know who you are, but go ahead and state your name for the record, please.
Yes, George Hernandez, 9225 Enclave Green Lane East, Germantown, Tennessee, 38139. Mayor Palazzolo, Vice Mayor Gibson, and Aldermen, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to address you tonight. And I also appreciate the fact that the agenda item on this particular topic, as I saw it online, was 93 pages in length. So I trust that you have a wealth of information at hand relative to this project. And accordingly, I'll keep my remarks brief. And I won't repeat some of the history, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring back a little bit of the history during my presentation. What I'd like to also do is, if at the end of my presentation there are further details that you're interested in the project itself, or certainly if you have any questions, I'll be glad to address those at the appropriate time. In our opinion, tonight's really an exciting time for Campbell Clinic, and we hope that it's the same for the city of Germantown. Campbell Clinic has a really rich history, filled with bold, sometimes innovative, and in some cases pioneering decisions and events. Much of this does harken back to the days of Dr. Campbell and his partners, who at the time were really incredible innovators, both clinically and otherwise. And those are highlighted mostly in the application itself, so I won't repeat those. But the more recent history, I'd like to touch on some of the history that really focuses on the clinic's growth and our facilities, which, in my opinion, are equally as bold or innovative as some of those from Dr. Campbell and his partners. I'd like to touch on a couple of these because these really serve as the foundation or the backdrop for our project tonight. I've segregated some of these into 2 categories, into 2 phases, the first of which I refer to as Phase 1. And Phase 1, many of you probably know this history, but in 1992, the clinic, the leadership of the clinic at that time, elected to move to Germantown and purchase 15 acres of property in the Germantown Road, Wolf River Boulevard vicinity. We actually purchased 2 7.5-acre parcels. And remember that this was really during an era when physician offices were predominantly located on hospital campuses. But the clinic decided to relocate our primary office from what was 869 Madison Avenue in Memphis to what was then a fledgling office and commercial district in Germantown. Unbeknownst at the time, this move, in retrospect, has served as the catalyst to what has become what we consider a thriving medical corridor in Germantown. At that same time, 1992, the clinic partnered with Baptist Memorial Healthcare, and that partnership consisted of one of those parcels, developing it with a 58,000 square foot medical office building, which is currently the Campbell Clinic today. One component of that transaction was that the clinic signed a 25-year lease for that facility. Fast forward a decade later, the continued growth of ambulatory surgery, particularly in the case of orthopedics, warranted our developing the Campbell Clinic Surgery Center. At the time, it began as a 2 operating room ambulatory surgery center. It was located on a portion of the second parcel fronting Briarbrook Road. Certificate of need was issued by the state as required, and initially opened in 2002. 2 years later, we were at capacity in that facility and ended up opening up the other 2 operating rooms and have operated since then with 4 operating rooms. Phase 2 moves ahead to the year 2012. And at that time, the Campbell Clinic purchased Baptist Partnership interest. And we did that in large part because it was important that we secure the Campbell Clinic's long-term occupancy in that current facility beyond the 25-year lease term, which was set to expire in 2017. But even more importantly than that is that what this transaction allowed us to do is to really ensure the clinic's full control of the entire 15-acre parcel. Both parcels at this point were then owned by Campbell Clinic. Following that and a strategic planning initiative internally, we filed for and had the entire 15-acre campus rezoned from O to O51. This was a significant driver because now the capacity of the land was such that we felt that it could accommodate our long-term growth plans. We continued along that with development using outside consultants, architects, land planners, and other experts. And we developed a development plan and subsequently submitted an outline plan and a site plan to the City of Germantown, both of which were subsequently approved. Taking a step aside, I guess, from the history and how we got here, and even though it's not really an element of the pilot application, we believe the project will have a significant impact indirectly, what we call the downstream effect on the City of Germantown, beyond the jobs, beyond the capital investment, and even beyond the stability that we anticipate it will bring to the city. On the screen here are a few statistics that are representative of what the Campbell Clinic currently brings to the City of Germantown. So you can see 162,000 patient visits per year. And actually approximately 40% of those are accompanied by one or more other individuals. A broad geography of patients. And again, this is just the Germantown office itself, but you can see we have a broad geographic reach locally, regionally, out of state, and even internationally. And then couple that with our employees. We have 280 employees on the Germantown campus, 50 of whom call Germantown their home today. In summary, just as in 1992, when the Campbell Clinic physicians and leaderships had the vision and ultimately took a bold step to set the direction for the next generation of Campbell Clinic, we're at a very similar point again. The project before you is a culmination of a multi-year facility planning and strategic plan. The process involved all 46 of the shareholder physicians of the clinic and the leadership. And I will say that to get to this point, we considered a broad spectrum of alternatives before reaching the conclusion that the Campbell Clinic's future and our success for the next generation and beyond can be realized in substantial part by our recommitting to and reinvesting in the city of Germantown. The pilot is an integral part of that economic development. Only time will tell, but perhaps the Campbell Clinic will again serve as a catalyst for other great things occurring in the city of Germantown. So on behalf of the physician leadership, the administrative staff, all the employees of the Campbell Clinic, we respectfully request your consideration and approval of this project so that we can position the next generation of Campbell Clinic for a future of continued success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Let's go ahead and get a motion on the table, and then we can open up for questions and discussion. Is there a motion to approve a retention pilot of 8 years with 75% abatement of real intangible personal property taxes for Campbell Clinic as set forth in the provided IDB Resolution number 2018-1?
So moved.
So motion? There's a motion and a second. I will also point out that the chairman of the IDB board is here this evening, Mr. Henry Evans, and any of staff, the applicant, the board chair, will be glad to answer any questions. The floor is open. Mr. Massey.
Mayor, if no one else has comments, I guess I'll go ahead and enter mine into.
I do, but it doesn't matter.
Go ahead.
Sure, sure. Yes, I'll be brief. I think, board members, I think we've got before us a choice to make for a great corporate citizen in Campbell Clinic since 1992. As we've heard from the West Clinic previously tonight, I think the Campbell Clinic is largely responsible in part for the development of our medical corridor, which is so successful. I think over the years, our IDB, as well as this board, has been very conservative in granting of pilots. I think that's exhibited by the fact that we only have one pilot now, if I'm not mistaken, and one retention, is what I thought I heard. And, you know, I can't say, I don't know if this is the right wording, but I'm not necessarily an advocate for pilots. However, I understand that this is the environment that municipalities must live in, work, and react to. And so, for me, the loss of Orgel to our sister city was a wake-up call, and I would hate to see us lose such a great corporate citizen to one of our sister cities to the east or to the west, or even worse, out of state, to another municipality that would, without any doubt, offer Campbell Clinic such a pilot and tax abatement program. And so with that, I'll encourage the rest of my board members to vote for this.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes, I've not been an advocate for pilots either. One of the things that's always concerned me is we give these tax breaks and then they leave. In reviewing this, including our large book, and understanding the history of Campbell Clinic, I believe that they will be here after the 8 years is over. and maybe they may be even expanding further at that point. So I will be voting yes for this. We definitely, after 8 years, we definitely have an estimated annual abatement of 400, or payment of $439,000 versus the 140 we're getting now. So I think that's a good investment in the future. I also think they're a great asset to our community. So again, I'll be voting for this. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
I think Alderman Massey was.
Okay, well, you had raised your hand. I thought he was going to. Go ahead, Alderman Massey, please.
So first, I'd just like to say thank you to Mr. Hernandez for being here tonight. You've served on, I think, a number of different commissions. I know the Planning Commission. You've led your company well, and I appreciate your service as one of our reserve officers. So thank you for that. Having said that, you've heard the saying that if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Well, that's kind of my position on this. It's really the same position that I took with the Germantown Education Foundation. I think you're at a point as a company where you don't need to be subsidized by taxpayer money. And so that is why I'm opposing this tonight. You know, as a conservative, I just don't believe in what the broader public considers corporate welfare. I don't particularly like that word, and I won't hold it against my colleagues on the board for voting in favor of this. It's just a different way of thinking about things, and mine's a more conservative way of thinking about things. So, having said that, I think the best thing to do is probably just to read my comments in. I think Germantown is fortunate to have Campbell Clinic and its employees located in our city, but I'm opposed to using taxpayer money like corporate welfare. So I am opposed to granting the pilot. My decision does not reflect how much I value the contributions Campbell Clinic makes to our community. But I would like to remind the mayor, Alderman Gibson, Owens, and Yonda that it has only been 8 months since we voted, since they voted to implement a 21-cent tax increase on the rest of Germantown's residents, some of whom are on fixed incomes and are impacted much more by a 21-cent tax increase than Campbell Clinic would be from the savings they'll realize from the pilot. I'd also like to remind Campbell Clinic that their corporation and employees will benefit from the superior emergency services and schools that are paid for with tax dollars. In fact, the city has 2 items on the agenda tonight to approve the purchase of the right-of-way to improve Germantown Road, which will benefit Campbell Clinic. Campbell Clinic is a multi-million-dollar company, and I want their leadership to consider whether or not they are sending the right message as a corporate citizen by asking the board to give Campbell's Clinic a tax break in the same year the board has asked the rest of our other citizens to pay a tax increase. Now, beyond that, I've expressed some other concerns about the way the IDB has been constituted, and I'm not sure if you're aware of that or not, but I have some, I think, very valid concerns about whether or not the IDB was legally constituted. I asked for an opinion. The city attorney gave an opinion. Now, my problem with that is that the city attorney worked for the same law firm that also represents the IDB. I felt like that was a conflict. So, in my opinion, before you move forward, I would like to get an opinion from Nashville about whether or not the IDB is legally constituted. I don't want to see you into a situation where this pilot is approved and then there's a legal challenge. That could happen. So I'd rather resolve this on the front end rather than on the back end of things. So I do appreciate everything Campbell Clinic does. I'm glad to have you here. I just can't support subsidizing you with taxpayer money. So thank you.
Thank you, Alderman, Vice Mayor, or Alderman Barzizza. Who would like to go?
Thank
Ladies
you.
first. Go ahead.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Hernandez, I've actually never spoken with you about Campbell Clinic. We've always had conversations as your role as a reserve officer, and so thank you for your service, first of all. Words that I think of when I think of Campbell Clinic have been said tonight: significant impact on our community. Mr. Barbados and Mr. Mounts both indicated collaboration with physicians, that proximity, that radius of what this medical corridor means to the city of Germantown. I do support this pilot. I echo many of the comments that Alderman Owens and Alderman Yonda said as far as what that balance looks like. I believe that this retention pilot is necessary to keep you here. I know that you will be continue to be a good city partner with us already, and I do support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Barzizza.
Thank you. I've been a patient at Campbell's Clinic since I was 12 years old for various and sundry different things, mostly back then. But, and believe me, that you do, Campbell's Clinic does absolutely incredible work. And I owe a lot to them from my youth for the injuries that I had. But, and being a conservative like Dean, I respectfully disagree with Dean on the fact that I think that the people of Germantown appreciate Campbell's Clinic for what it is and what it does for the community, what it does for them personally. And my wife is just over there the other day visiting a young man that I helped raise who's an MD over there. And so, you know, they're doing incredible work. And you guys are without a doubt one of the pillars of our community. I truly appreciate all that Campbell's Clinic has done for me, myself, and I. But seriously, the community has got a real star in its crown because of you. Y'all are that star. I'll certainly be voting yes. I'm not in favor of pilots. I've never have been in favor of pilots. I think it's to a degree they are sometimes can be a waste of the taxpayers' money. It depends on how the money is managed. And I think what you're doing and how you're managing and the construction, the growth that has been phenomenal at Campbell's Clinic with and some of the finest doctors that I have ever seen, and a lot of them are friends of mine or acquaintances. And so I just want to say I'm very proud of Campbell's Clinic and their location here in our community.
Thank you, Alderman. It's been properly motioned and seconded. Please call the roll.
Alderman Barzizza?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez and Campbell, congratulations. You have your pilot. I would simply state that I hope none of my friends from Methodist Labonte are here this evening, but when you moved into this region and this city, it put us on the map as far as becoming a major health corridor. I think 6 of the 10 largest private practices are located in Germantown. That's 6 of the 10 largest in the entire region, not just in this little area of the region. So again, with all due respect for them, I hope no one from Methodist is here, and perhaps this won't be taped or recorded. But I do congratulate you, and we look forward to the expansion, and we look forward to the invitation for the groundbreaking and the ribbon cutting. So congratulations. That takes us to item number 13 on the agenda this evening, Ordinance 2018-5, rezoning of the Reeves Schaefer property located at 3258 Forest Hill Irene Road and 9190 Winding Oak Way from C1 Neighborhood Commercial and RE1 Residential Estate to R Residential Zoning. First reading, Mr. Ross.
Mayor, members of the board, permit me just a moment while I have the floor to say thank you to all of you as well as administration for your support of the family of Sherry as well as the department through these challenging times that we are still working for. So I do appreciate that. The family appreciates that. The employees of the department appreciate that. So thank you. So item number 13, Ordinance 2018-5, is the rezoning of the Reeves Schaefer property at Forest Hill Irene and Winding Oak Way. Currently consists of C1 Neighborhood Commercial and RE1 Residential Estate. The change would be to residential zoning. This is the first reading. A little bit of background on this request. The rezoning is for approximately 32 acres that consist of slivers of C1. However, it is part of it, but when I say slivers, it's by square footage rather than acre in the amount of C1 that's being changed. The majority of the 32 acres is zoned RE1, or residential estate 1 acre minimum. The entire property is 41.78 acres. 6.8 of that 41 is already zoned R residential, and 2.8 would remain RE1. A little bit of background on this property. The property was recorded as the Oaks subdivision in 1987 in unincorporated Shelby County. 9190 Winding Oak Way was the only house built. The rest of the property remained vacant. In 2000, this entire property was annexed into the city of Germantown as RE1. In 2006, portions of the property were rezoned RE1 to C1 and R to allow for more development opportunities. And in that same year, 2006, Weldon Woods subdivision was approved that included 4 detention areas, 33 lots, 11 were zoned R, and 22 were in the RE1. However, that project was never recorded and developed. As part of this request, we also look at 2366 of the ordinance, which permits zoning changes such as when there's been a change in the neighborhood. Justification for rezoning shall conform to one or more of 4 criteria as established by the Tennessee courts. The applicant provided the following justification, including a change in the neighborhood due to the new school site to the south, the widening of Forest Hill Irene Road, and that in their analysis, the market does not dictate a strong desire for numerous RE1 lots. As part of their proposal, the applicant did provide a conceptual site plan that is required per section 226 that conforms with the zoning. So what they provided and updated to you this morning was a 67 lot concept plus a park that integrated into the school site plan. Again, this conceptual plan is simply to show how the property could be developed under the requested zoning and would not be an approved development plan by what you consider tonight. There are more steps to follow for any development plan on this site, including a public hearing that would be at the second reading, third reading, and then activity at the Planning Commission level to determine how the applicant may consider developing it. The applicant did show in this plan that was provided to you that there are setbacks. You can see the setbacks that they've shown within the development plan, along with that possible park location that does tie in with the school site development. But again, this is just a concept, and the applicant is not held to this plan as part of your approval. It is just a requirement of the code 23226 and part of the rezoning process. The applicant is here, and staff, I am still available if there are any questions. This does conform to the 2030 strategic plan, and looking at the land use and transportation strategic objective 4 of the city experiencing positive trends and assessed value of residential areas. Thank you, Mayor, members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Is there a motion to approve on first reading ordinance 2018-5, the zoning of the Reeves Schaefer property, 3258 Forest Hill Irene Road and 9190 Winding Oak Way from C1 Neighborhood Commercial and RE1 Residential Estate to R Residential Zoning, and to set a public hearing on March 12th, 2018.
I'll make that motion.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion, please. Alderman Massey?
I have a question.
Sure.
Mr. Ross, who were the developers when the city approved the plan for Weldon Woods?
Mr. Massey, I do not have that in my notes in front of me, but we can provide that.
Okay. Do you know, did it change when the subdivision changed to Forest Lakes?
No, I don't know. I don't have that information in front of me. It's, the property is still owned but under option, but it's still owned by the Reeves Family Trust and the Schaefer family. So that's the fee title property ownership at this point.
Do you know when that option was taken?
I do not. The option isn't relevant necessarily to the zone change.
Well, it's relevant to me. So you said the applicant is here?
The applicant is here.
Can he come forward?
Please come forward and come to the podium in the middle and state your name and address for the record. And if you have any other consultants or anything with you, please bring those folks forward as well.
My name is John Duke. Office is at 985 Reddick Cove, Memphis, Tennessee, and I'm the applicant.
Alderman, go ahead.
Mr. Duke, were you part of the development group that was planning Weldon Wood subdivision?
No, I wasn't. I believe that was the Schaefer. They owned all of that and made it into a big compound.
Okay. So you think it was the Schaefers?
I know they had a subdivision on it and only one house was built.
Okay.
The one that Mr. Schaefer lives in now.
So when did you decide that you were going to purchase this property and develop it?
I read in the paper that there were 5 sites that Germantown was looking at for a school, and I had previously tried to develop the Warlick property, and I knew that was not a possibility. And I also didn't think it'd be down on Winchester, and so I figured that the best site would be on Forest Hill Irene Road, and so I contacted Sammy Morris, who is the head of the Reeves Family Trust, and asked to see if they would be interested in selling their property because I felt the school was going to go in right next door.
And so at that point, is it true that it was taken off the list of prospects for the new school site?
I have no idea.
Do you know about the approximate date that occurred?
I don't. I just know it was in the paper, and that's when I figured it would be one of those sites that at that point it'd been sitting there for 10 years vacant, trying to be sold, and the main criteria to have it rezoned would be a school would be a substantial change. So I just took the chance that there might be a change, that the school might go there.
Okay, so it was just a wild guess that the school might go there that prompted you to make your offer.
I like to think it was educated, but yes, it probably was a wild guess.
Okay. So do you have any agreements with other developers or home builders to develop the Reeves property and build homes?
No.
Do you have any other partners?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and who are they?
My friend Henry Waddell is my financial partner.
No other builders?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Barzizan.
Mr. Duke,
Yes.
do you have any plans in changing this from this particular plan to a PUD?
Well, I've been working with the neighbors on a plan. I would like to have some a little bit higher density against the railroad track because I don't think you could really sell expensive homes against the railroad track. I want to put a service drive back there similar to, I've developed the last 4 phases of the enclave, and we've been very successful with that. And I wanted to put a service drive against the railroad track with a big, I think it's about a 75-foot buffer.
The plan we are voting on tonight, this plan here could be modified to include a PUD.
It could,
correct?
yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant?
I do have a
Let's go through the round of everyone first. Vice Mayor Gibson.
Mr. Ross, for a concept plan, it's not out of the norm because that will change. It could change, correct? Could you just maybe explain what the difference between a concept plan and, say, a development plan?
Ms. Gibson, as part of any rezoning, the applicant is required to submit a concept plan that conforms with the zoning that they're requesting. So this is, the same things happened all over town with any other rezonings. The concept plan was submitted with the last rezoning that was included from commercial to retirement housing, where we just modified the legal description. They'll come back with a preliminary final development plan, an outline plan if they choose to do the plan unit development route. There are multiple plans that we will see and will be reviewed by staff, the Planning Commission, and this body as part of the development process.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Owens.
I was disappointed to hear from Mr. Speed that I'm sorry. I thought at the Planning Commission level that we had an agreement that you guys were working on, and I understand where you're coming from, certainly. Just expressing my disappointment because I thought that you guys were okay with it, but apparently that is not the case. I see. I understand.
Things haven't changed with me. This is the first time I'd heard that we didn't have an agreement was tonight.
Understand.
Okay.
And certainly the neighborhood has a right to change
Right,
their
I
mind,
understand
and I
that.
respect that completely.
Mm-hmm.
One of the criteria that we have when we are considering rezoning of property is a change in the neighborhood, in the character. I believe that the selection of the school site does constitute such a change. I believe that the proposed widening in conjunction with that is a change to this area. Although it has not occurred yet, I believe that it is imminent and it is a change in the area. That's one of the, as I mentioned, one of the criteria for rezoning. I would also submit that, and someone's going to call me out wrong on this, I'm sure. I'm just trying to think through every one in my head. But I believe that in every case, in every elementary and middle and high school within our city, we have property surrounding that is zoned 15,000 square foot lots are residential zoning. And I think that is appropriate to develop a neighborhood around a school. And so, the plan development is a different issue. I'm taking that off the table. Although Mr. Duke has indicated that he would like to come forward with a plan development, he would have to go through the Planning Commission and back to this board, and I'm not so sure, and I'm stating this out loud right now, that maybe smaller lots are appropriate here, even up against the railroad tracks. Good planning would dictate that up against a commercial property and up against a railroad, perhaps smaller density. But I'm also sensitive to the residents' desires, although they would probably disagree with that based on some of the votes we've had. I believe that our zoning is appropriate around a school to create a neighborhood school. And so all we're asking for tonight, or what is before us tonight, is the request to rezone from RE1 1-acre lots, very large lots, and to create a neighborhood school, a neighborhood around this school in our zoning, and I believe that is appropriate. With that, I'll pass.
Alderman Yonda.
Mr. Duke, is your intention, of course we would see it later, obviously, to have this similar to the enclave?
No, only against the railroad track.
Only in terms of?
I just can't sell a big lot against a railroad track. It's,
So maybe it's more like enclave estates?
No, it's very simple, yes.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And I can tell you that I'm getting paranoid about having lived in zero lot lines and in the enclave because everybody seems to be thinking they're not very good. But
we're in our last phase.
I live right next to the railroad in Roanoke and in enclave. Now I have to have noise in my room so I can go to sleep. So you may be wrong in that railroad thing. But this is going to be very similar to those, but just not zero, more like the estate area.
Yes, sir. Okay. I have it stepped, and what I just want to say is that we're not having any roads that will go through any other, it'll be completely self-contained, and the adjacent neighbors are not opposed to it. It's, you know, they're in support of it. Mr. Schaefer's in support of it. And so, yeah, I just would hope I can convince you. Obviously, that's not on the table today, that against the railroad track and the commercial that I'm backing up to on the north side of the development, that I would be able to have a little bit smaller lots so I can create a 75 to 100-foot buffer,
To keep
you
it
know,
back,
yeah, behind there. So I'll still have the same number of lots as allowed, but I'd just be able to create a buffer.
Okay, Mr. Ross, in the history of these promises the city has supposedly made, do we have any documentation of that, or is there anything in our minutes, or is it just some alderman has randomly gone and said, hey, we're never going to do this, or have you found any facts or documentation that says this has to be 1 acre estate lots?
Alderman Yonda, in our research of the minutes, we have not found that yet.
Okay. I'm through. Thank you.
All right, round two, anyone? Alderman or Vice Mayor Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mr. Duke, I don't have any more questions for you, but I would like to make a statement. I grew up here. The last elementary school that was built in our city was Dogwood Elementary, and I moved into the neighborhood next door, Farmington East. We were the second home in the neighborhood. It was formerly a horse pasture, and I got to see those homes grow up around there, and they are at the heart of where the genesis of the great schools that we have, Dogwood Elementary, Farmington, those schools around there. Those homes grew to the school. And so I'm going to support this concept plan. The conversations that y'all have had with the neighbors, my hope will be that that will continue. I heard Mr. Speed when he said that things had changed, and so if that's not something that you're aware of now, I'd like to see that y'all have some conversation about that, because this will come to us 3 different times. Next time it will be for the public hearing, but we want to see what that would look like. Again, I thank you. I don't actually have another question for Mr. Ross either. Thank you.
Alderman Barzizan.
This one's for Mr. Ross. Given the location for the new school and the plan as it's drawn currently, would there be additional space available to add on to that school if need be? Let's say we wanted to put a junior high adjacent or as part of that campus. Do we have enough ground space to do that?
While I don't want to speak for the school district with this, based on my own professional background, there's plenty of acreage to consider expansion and opportunity on that site. We included that, you've got the new school site here, and then the other 40 some odd acres, so they're relatively equal. We're building a school that can hold upwards of 700 students at the K through 5 level. There's plenty of other land available. They've pushed it significantly back off of the road as part of their design. They've taken into consideration a significant queuing line so that there's no issues of backing up traffic even onto the improved Forest Hill Irene right-of-way. But in direct answer to your question, Alderman Barzizan, in my professional experience of reviewing plans, there is enough land.
We'll have plenty of space to
Yes,
increase the size of the school if need be. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's enough.
Any other discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, go ahead.
So, Mr. Duke, why did you ask the city to rezone this parcel from residential estate to residential?
This will be my 10th development in the city of Germantown. I have a really, what I'm proud of, track record here. I've got some beautiful developments that I've done. I'm very proud of all of them. And I really would like to create a neighborhood that children can go to school, they can walk on sidewalks, and we're going to have connectivity to the school. We're going to have a pedestrian entrance into the school. And it'd be something I'd be proud of, and have it where people can actually afford to live there instead of 1 acre lots. The problem with 1 acre lots is they're very expensive. The houses are very expensive, and they're not really conducive to having families or a neighborhood school. And I'm going to be very proud of this development. I think the city will be very proud of it. I'll be proud of their neighborhood schools, and I want to create this neighborhood for this school.
So, Mr. Duke, I'll just tell you what I'm struggling with. You know, Alderman Yonda asked if there had been promises made to the residents by the city. Well, I think there was more than just a promise. I mean, the city, the legislative body at one time rezoned this area for residential estate lots. There's bigger lots. The people that purchased their properties thereafter relied on that contract with the city in the form of a zoning ordinance. And so now what we're doing is we're going in and we're pulling the rug out from under their feet once again and saying that we as legislators know better than the previous legislators knew. And I think that's unfair to those people who relied on those agreements when they purchased their homes or agreed to be a part of the annexation. So the other problem that I have is that we, you know, as the board just recently passed a moratorium on apartments. And the stated reason for that was needing more studies to determine what the impact of the additional density would be on that area of town or the city as a whole. And so I just feel like we're sending a little bit of a mixed message when we are allowing you as a developer to go in and then rezone this parcel for smaller lots. I mean, if we need to study the impact of higher density, then I think this project should be on hold too. I don't oppose you developing it as residential estate lots, those bigger lots. I would support that. What I don't support is changing the rules in the middle of the game so that you can sell your homes. I don't think that's the purpose of the board and our zoning. That's just the way I feel about it. So and I think, how much time do I have, Mayor?
You have about 5 more minutes.
5 minutes? So I'm going to read into the record a letter. I think Alderman Yolen's mom is ready to leave. I tell you what, I'll hold this until next time. We have 2 other readings, so I'll hold this and read it at one of the other hearings. How's that?
There has been a motion and it's been properly seconded. Any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Barzizza?
No.
The motion carries and moves to a public hearing which will be held on March the 12th, 2018. We have reached the conclusion of our Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting this evening, so we are now adjourned. However, we are now going to commence as a beer board, and I call the beer board to order. All aldermen present and accounted for. We have one item on the beer board this evening, the re-evaluation of suspension of beer license, Circle K, number 3660, 1351 South Germantown Road. Prosecutor Matt Price, Chief Prosecutor Matt Price, welcome.
Mayor, if I could interrupt, I'd like to release the staff as well.
Sure. Margaret, you can leave too if you like.
She must be driving.
Mr. Prosecutor, please put on your case.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Board. If you could all come up, please. This is an uncontested hearing. If the board recalls, at the last meeting, we had a hearing in absentia where the board found Circle K guilty, essentially, of the alleged offense. The vote at that time was that the license would be suspended indefinitely. Since that time, I've spoken with a representative from Circle K, We are coming to the board with a joint recommendation. If the board wishes to hear that, but there is no additional testimony or no additional witnesses to be heard for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. So, in essence, generally, the protocol is that we have we hear an admission of guilt and take a vote on that. We did that at the first hearing in absentia. So, this evening, do you have, in essence, a recommendation for the board to consider?
Yes, and if we were to reopen the proceedings, my understanding is there would be an admission of guilt too.
So, we'd like to do that at this
time?
Yeah, we could. Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, we do plead guilty for the act when we failed the beer sting.
Okay, and please state your name for the record.
Catherine James, Market Manager, Circle K.
Okay. And is this your attorney as well? Okay. Do you have any statement you'd like to make?
Ben Fox, attorney on behalf of Circle K. And after the last hearing, we submitted a letter to the mayor and to the aldermen explaining the reason for missing the last hearing, and it was make no excuses. It was a missed hearing. It got off of a calendar, and so Circle K apologizes greatly for that. But had Circle K been here, they would have stated that they admit to the violation. The employee was terminated, as is the policy. And as a result of that, the entire staff at the location has been retrained, which is consistent with the training that they get when they become new hires. And if the mayor and alderman would like, we can talk about some of the procedures that we have in place, proactive and reactive measures. But I'm not sure.
Let's go ahead, and would it be appropriate this time to go ahead and make a motion for an admission of guilt? Is that appropriate at this time, both of our attorneys?
You could, but I think since there's a joint proposed resolution, you might want to hear from Prosecutor Price what that is, and then you get the whole picture before you proceed.
Okay, go ahead. Please
Thank
continue.
You. The joint resolution would be a $1,500 civil penalty in lieu of further suspension of the beer license. There are some aggravating factors that would make this rise a little bit more than the typical penalty that this board might hear. At the same time, though, have spoken with counsel and with Circle K management, and we're comfortable that there's also been some remedial measures taken, which would sort of take us down from the max penalty. So the two parties would jointly recommend to this board a $1,500 civil penalty in lieu of any further suspension.
We would make that in the form of a motion. There's a motion to accept a consent by parties of accepting a $1,500 fine for as a penalty. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any questions or discussion of the applicant?
Yes.
Go ahead, Alderman.
Do you have the equipment to scan driver's licenses?
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay. And you know, if you're under 21, the driver's license looks different
Yes,
anyway.
sir, we do. And the night of the beer sting, it was just inadvertent on our cashier's part. She had been a long-time employee. The new system, we actually do scan the ID at the register. In the process of scanning, she was asked to get another product and turned around. She did not see it flash that it was an invalid ID. And she went back, rescanned the product, and instead of requesting the ID a second time, she just hit bypass. So we do accept guilt on this.
Any other questions of staff, the city prosecutor, or the defendants? Alderman Owens.
And I'm sorry, I was reading. Could you discuss briefly the remedial? You said that some things had been put in place to.
Yes, Alderman. My understanding in speaking with counsel and management at Circle K, there's been retraining of the individuals at this location. I believe there's also the termination of the offending individual. Also, Circle K is committed to doing sort of ad hoc huddle sessions or little mini training sessions as needed on an ongoing basis, including, I believe, even some sort of internal type stings.
We actually have a third-party company that comes and does stings for us now.
Thank you.
Any other questions? It's been properly moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Barzizza.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Well, the case has been concluded, and we've reached the end of our business as a beer board. We are adjourned. I would like to thank Ed and Al and Eric for taking us this evening. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Okay. Yeah. So what I need to announce?